with the Department of City Planning's Office of Design. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. We're going to give folks maybe till about 5 after the hour to make sure we get everybody in and can join us from the very beginning. Just a reminder, we are going to record this. We've been, since we've been virtual through most of this process, we are recording everything and making it available on our sharepeachtree.com website. You can see the web address down there at the bottom of the title screen, and you're welcome to check this out anytime after the meeting. We try to get things posted within a day or so of the meeting, and I'll make that announcement again for everybody that's joining us here as we get started. So hang tight and we will get going here in just a moment. Which is actually slow, but I'm going to trust my other two clocks here. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Once again, for everybody just signing on, my name is Kevin Bacon. I'm the Director of the Office of Design for the Department of City Planning. For those of you that have been following us throughout the Peachtree Shared Space project since we started this about middle of the last year, welcome back. And for those of you who are new, welcome. We're glad that you have carved time out of your Monday evening to join us this evening. We've got quite a few things to talk about tonight. Most exciting, I'm sure, is the kind of the impending changes that we'll be doing to Peachtree Street, the temporary changes. We are going to do for everybody that is needs a refresher or joining us for the first time, we'll go back through and talk about what this project is in its entirety, where it came from, and how that's connected to what we're proposing for June. How these temporary projects, these demonstration projects, will be adding up to hopefully inform the design, how that's a part of our engagement, what comes next, how you can get involved, and a chance for some discussion and some Q&A. For some housekeeping procedures, for those that were a part of our workshop back at the end of January, recalling some that we did have for the first time, this whole pandemic, some issues of some Zoom crashing that was pretty jarring. So we have since then taken the steps to lock down the Zoom platform to hopefully make sure that nobody can hijack the system. We've got plenty of co-hosts and IT support standing by to hopefully make sure that this is a smooth experience. Thankfully, everything since then has run well. In the event that somebody does take control of this and we're not able to quickly reestablish control, we will shut the entire system down, clean out the user list, and then join us back on the link as we'll try to get us restarted. Because we do have to keep everything under control. The one thing we do have open is the chat. So as we get to Q&A, we will be using the chat feature to collect questions. So please be sure to put those in there. For any of our responses that refer to links or other documents, we'll do our best to post those links there as well. Megan McMullen from our consultant team will be your DJ this evening, who will help make sure that we're tracking all the questions and doing our best to provide responses to all of those. So let's go on to the next. Joining us tonight, your primary speakers will be those you see in front of you, with one exception. Tony Garcia is not able to join us this evening. He is not feeling well, unfortunately, and we're going to try to do him proud and talk about the great work that Street Plans has done in helping us think through and talk to others about the demonstration project. From our consultant team, Addie Weber from Tool Design, their project manager, she'll be taking over for Tony and talking about the details of the demonstration project. Kevin Bacon, I've already introduced myself, and Monique Forte, our city's dedicated project manager, not just for this current scope of work, but the demonstration project and everything else. This is kind of a milestone in terms of understanding that you don't make these big proposals for Peachtree Street or your city's Main Street every day. And then this is one of many stepping stones that we'll take as we go through this. And she's going to be there managing, coordinating, and keeping us all in line in every step of the way. And you'll hear from all of us tonight. So let's talk a little bit about the project for everybody that's here for the first time. So when we're talking about Peachtree Street, what we're talking about is a length about 1.25 miles plus or minus from about North Avenue on your right-hand side to Marietta Street on your left-hand side. My video is blocking up a small portion of the screen, so I'm having to just make sure I've got myself situated. And this really comes from work that we began way back in 2016 when the Atlanta City Studio was just forming, and one of the major questions that design team was tasked with was Peachtree Street is our main street, and we are an international city. Why doesn't it feel like it every day? You know, we have great signature events like Dragon Con and other major parades and other events that happen there, and Atlanta Streets Alive that we've participated in and hope to again someday very, very soon. But on the average day, there's kind of the hustle and bustle of the city, but it lacks kind of the vibrancy that you see and similar to other cities. And not just a single Peachtree out, but if we can get it right for Peachtree in terms of how we think about our public spaces, setting the tone for our public spaces throughout downtown and the rest of the city. So what you're seeing here is the culmination of the studio's work many years ago. We first unveiled it at Atlanta Streets Alive in 2018, and a couple of other different meetings and conversations to start sharing the idea. This really was just a what if. We looked at the right of way of the street. We looked at other cities that were doing interesting things. Some of the things that we heard and still continue to hear is we think Peachtree Street should just be cut down or shut down to cars completely. And they should not be in the space, and it should be pedestrians and bicycles only. We hear that actually about a lot of our streets, and if you start to do that to all of our streets, we start to kind of create a whole nother situation of traffic challenges and public life challenges. So one of the things we wanted to is you know, is there a better public space design that you know, cars can inhabit, but the balance, the majority of the space is shifted about, you know, how do we accommodate and make a space for people, you know, bikes and pedestrians, but really that life you want to see on the street every day. So we've started looking at shared streets and shared spaces, looking at examples. We talked about Bell Street when we did our virtual tour in January. We've liked Exhibition Road in London a lot, several others, and they're all just a little bit different. But the idea is that you kind of remove the limitations between users and kind of reinforce space and where things happen by the design of it rather than striping and signage and again, carving out as much of that place for people. And so it was a very, informal start to the process, talking to developers, people on the street, and using that to kind of paint a picture of what could be. And so this next part of the study was really to kind of understand, all right, are we crazy? It seemed that there was some traction for the idea that people were receptive to it. Still those that really want to make sure that we're doing the most for pedestrians, bicycles, and other modes as possible. So we've hired Tool Design and been working with them for over a year to really test us. Are we crazy? Is something like this feasible? Really looking at the traffic flows throughout the corridor and side streets, looking at what buses are doing, talking about what type of activities we could have on the space. How do we operate and maintain it? Who takes care of these big spaces once they're figured out, and really bring that refinement to the design that kind of takes the concept design up to another notch of seriousness, and package it in a way that is different federal funds becoming available. There's no funding for this project yet. We're just still understanding what it is. Could we have the information ready and available, one to talk about publicly in a way that's easy to understand and approachable, but also for departments of transportation, federal highways, when they come and have their applications, can we have that information ready to potentially make a pursuit for funding for this? And then the other part of this too is making sure that we're not just jumping in and spending $10-20 million overnight. I'm making up these numbers, but before you make these massive investments, let's try it before we buy it. And that's the idea of this demonstration project, that we want to do a temporary reconfiguration of Peachtree Street based on what we've learned both from community engagement and from the technical analysis, and observe, see how it works. Hopefully it works fantastic. We don't need any changes, and we just keep going. And the reality is that's rarely likely the case. Edits need to be made, and it informs us how to make a better design. And we want to hear people throughout that process. So we'll talk mostly about tonight about what that demonstration project is. And this is really coming at the end of our scope of work with Tool. You can see that we've been doing the existing conditions, looking at different designs, refinement of the street, and talking through those, doing those with a series of workshops. Talking about activation and programming, and this demonstration project is even though it's kind of the concluding point of this study, it's really the beginning part of what we do next in understanding, and do these different ideas embedded in the shared space really work. So as much as we'd like to keep Tool with us forever, and hopefully we can work with them again, it's really to help us kind of push us to this next phase, and start this demonstration project. So we're looking forward to getting that going. This is a culmination of the engagement that we've been doing over the last year, starting with open commenting on the website, different interviews that we've been doing in Zoom meetings, and thankfully now that the opening restrictions are starting to ease, we're starting to do some of those in person again. We had a great time walking up and down Peachtree again last week, and businesses are either starting to open or getting ready to reopen again. So owners and tenants are much easier to talk to or find and then talk to. And that's a big reason we're moving this demonstration project all the way to the very end of this. We wanted the kind of environment, the daily activity of Peachtree to be kind of as close as possible to the starting point when we got there. And it won't be perfect or exactly what it was before the pandemic. I don't think we'll go back exactly to life the way it is, but wanted to make sure that there were actually people that would be experiencing this when we move forward with it. Here you can see a lot of what we've heard. This is just a summary of this. I think if you go to our existing conditions report on sharepeachtree.com, there's much more documented there along the way as we've kind of taken people through the process of understanding what shared spaces are and what the idea for Peachtree was and how we've refined that and going forward. So we invite you to go on the website and take a look at all of those. But I think some of the overwhelming comments that we've heard is just how do we make Peachtree Street feel more like a city for people to be in, not just move through, but experiencing downtown. It's a great place, and how do we use that to highlight what a great place downtown is. Here's some examples. I think these are recent from last week where we were out. We were actually able to get both our own commissioner from city planning, Tim Keene, as well as Josh Rowan out. Hopefully everybody is a Yellow Jacket fan. If not, sorry. But it was great. There was a lot of nuance to what we're proposing, and it was great to talk to owners, those that we hadn't been able to engage so far, and hear the excitement about them just starting to reopen again, and that there's potential within what we're proposing for this first test of Peachtree Street for them to test their operations within it as well, and working with them to refine the design. And so I will say what you'll see tonight is the demonstration project as we were taking it to business and property owners last week and having a lot of really great conversation. The feedback and the kind of revisions to that design are happening right now in terms of spaces we need to carve out for them. So you won't necessarily see all of that tonight. We will share that as soon as we have the final version, but keep that in mind that this is something we'll probably be working on until the moment that we put this in the ground, and even after it goes in, because again, this is a test and we want to make sure that we're getting it right. Here, and also, this will be available soon on the website. You can kind of see the different shared space concepts. Again, this is thinking years and years and years into the future of ultimately, where we think we would like Peachtree to go. And the reason we're doing this demonstration project is to test different elements of this. It's incredibly difficult to test a shared space. The idea of the shared space is first and foremost that you're raising the street level up to the sidewalk level, and everything's kind of got a very same surface. And again, you're using the different materials to create these spaces, and that's a difficult thing to test one-to-one. So there are different elements that we'll be testing at different phases just to see how the street works, and we'll talk about that tonight. So the phasing strategy is the idea is that the demonstration project is the starting point for continuing to refine our design. And so what we're talking about for this demonstration project is 3 blocks. In the one of the questions for the shared space project was where does the shared space go? The studio had come to the conclusion that Peachtree Center and that general area, and the conversations we had was that was kind of the heart of downtown and made the most sense. And we looked at the entire corridor and think that there's some other areas that could benefit too, but this is the one that seemed to resonate the most, and in terms of the technical analysis seemed to fit. So we're going to be demonstrating from Baker Street to Ellis Street, those 3 blocks. And we'll go to the next one. And the point of this is to see what works, and get community input along the way. It's not that if we haven't heard you through the last year or up until this goes in the ground that this is it and this is done. This is meant to be this first phase in 90-day, and we're even planning so that if in the immediate days and weeks after that there are issues with this that we need to solve for our businesses, that we're prepared to do those as well, and that this is all something that is adjustable and kind of gets us to better understanding how the design works and getting to the final design. So the first phase of and what we'll be talking about most the most this evening is an idea of it'll be a 90-day demonstration. The week of June the 21st will be when we are out there starting to install, deploy, put into place the demonstration project. It'll probably take us about a week. And that by Saturday, June 26th, these improvements will be in place. And really what we're talking about for this is just simple changes to the street. And we'll get into the configuration of it here in just a minute, but temporary striping, planters, we'll have pictures of those that help us hold the edge, wheel stops, flex posts. At the same time, we want it to look really fantastic. We also want to make sure that in this first phase, the things that we put into place are easily adjustable. So if we need to make adjustments to this and make sure that it works for everybody for the 90-day period before we react to it, that we're able to do so. And this is all part of the project budget. In phase 2, after we've had a chance to really understand how the space works, we'll be working with Central Atlanta Progress to do more interim improvements, more painting in the areas of the lanes that we would propose that we're taking back, other street furniture elements, additional planters, potentially murals in the space, and really start to make it feel like home, and something that we think of testing for at least a year, possibly longer. We want to see how it goes. Part of a demonstration project is, it may not work. We may decide objectively that this isn't the right answer for Peachtree Street. It goes away, and then it's important that the materials that we're using are things that can be removed and used in projects elsewhere. But with each phase through this, that we're working on testing different things that get us closer to what you see in phase 3, which is in the way in the future of getting us to the shared space design with the permanent material changes and other fixtures that we would see being out in Peachtree for the long term. So kind of understanding that this is how we're proposing to ease ourselves into testing out Peachtree Street, I will turn it to Addie, who is going to take us through the drawings we were sharing with everybody out in the, really for the last several weeks, but we were out in the field with last week and talk about what it is specifically we're doing to Peachtree Street. So Addie.
Great, thanks, Kevin. Again, my name is Addie Weber. I'm with Tool Design Group, the lead consultant on this effort. And as Kevin mentioned, unfortunately, Tony Garcia is sick today and he won't be able to join this call. So I am replacing Tony. As Kevin mentioned, Tony is a principal of street plans, and they collaborate with communities across North America on these types of projects. So I'm going to be doing my best Tony Garcia impression. I'm not quite sure what that is yet, but bear with me as we go through this. But one of Tony's favorite sayings that he has is to test before you invest. And that is exactly what the city of Atlanta is doing with this project. Originally, the city had looked at this as a demonstration project of 1 or 2 days. But as we moved through this process, it became clear that this should really expand from the 1 day, 1 month test period to something more robust that Kevin mentioned. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, we can't test a true share space, which would mean rebuilding the street, as Kevin mentioned, as a curbless street. But there are two aspects that we can really test. And the first is lane reduction. I hope most folks, I've seen a number of people who have joined us before, had the opportunity to at least review the existing conditions report. But I'll let you know that this portion of Peachtree Street has some of the lowest vehicle volumes between Midtown and Buckhead. It also has an extraordinary number of sideswipe crashes caused by folks stopping in the outer lanes and then swerving to avoid those. So those are about 33% of the crashes. That's the highest crash type we have along the corridor. So we can test what happens when you reallocate those outer lanes to expand the sidewalk and provide dedicated areas for loading and unloading. And that's the exact second thing that we'll be testing, which is the wider sidewalks. Next slide. So we will evaluate how this is working just like anything else in phase 2. For those of you who joined us back in January, when Tony gave this original presentation, we went through a variety of designs and design consideration. And the one I'm presenting to you tonight, while still in draft form, we had a great corridor walk last week, and we stopped and watched some very close side swipes, some almost rear ends, some pedestrians playing games of Frogger through the corridor. So we took that kind of data that we saw as the city's kind of coming back to life again and applied that to these concepts. So what you're going to be seeing tonight is from last week, and we're still refining moving forward. Next slide. So the demonstration project will focus on 3 blocks between Baker Street and Ellis, with Peachtree Center being the center of this. This first phase will only be using wheel stops, planters, and traffic tape. And this was really done, we kind of started with, well, we could just go big and do a mural at first, but really we wanted to make sure we got it right before we did any kind of painting on the ground. So this will allow us to adjust as needed, particularly as it relates to loading and unloading areas along each block of Peachtree. Next slide, please. So those who have joined us in January or have been to our website, this is a project image that you see on the right of downtown Miami. And this is something similar that we are testing, something similar to what we were testing tonight. It's improved and increased space for walking. It's a space for outdoor dining. It's improved bicycle access. Anybody can use this space, as it will be finished at the end of our demonstration effort. Reduction in the number of travel lanes, and increasing the overall total space and vibrancy to this space. Next slide. So I'm going to go ahead and jump right in. This is a section from Baker down to John Portman, with Baker being on your left. North is to your left. The top image is existing and the bottom image is the proposed. Now we'll say again, last week we mentioned a lot, so we were going to be, refining these before they go into construction. The peach pink color you see will not be on the ground in phase 1. That is really just to highlight the area that we're changing. And the area that we are changing is the outside lanes of Peachtree, those current vehicular travel lanes along the sidewalk, and reallocating those back to the pedestrian. So we will have through here, and I'll get to a slide that kind of shows it in more detail, a mix of planters and curb stops along the outer lanes, and keeping the left turn movement and the access into the hotel. Next slide. Between John Portman and Andrew Young, we'll continue to expand the sidewalk, but allow for bus loading and unloading and the existing valet area. We sat back several times and watched the valet that was happening along there, along with the bus loading and unloading. For a note, bus loading will happen at street level, and we will have temporary curb ramps at mid-block to allow for those users that are coming off the bus to access the sidewalk. I think the biggest change, and then one of the most exciting changes we hope that people see, is the mid-block crossing and the removal of the fences along the edge of the sidewalk. This will do a lot for helping. We watch people are crossing there anyway, and kind of dedicating that space to folks. Next slide. And finally, between Andrew Young and Ellis, we will continue with the same treatment. What you don't see here is we had a great meeting last week with 200 Peachtree and the restaurateurs to discuss consolidating their valet requests. So they had each, the views and Mehans and the juke joint had all had some kind of valet in the works, and 200 kind of gathered them all together and said, hey, we'll put the valet in front of our area and really kind of give them the space to really activate in front of the restaurants. And we think that's a great example of, you know, sharing Peachtree and what it could really be about. Next slide. As mentioned, we are pulling from a variety of materials. ADID is a huge supporter of this, and we are working closely with them on this to use what we have and adding a bit more to make this work. So that's including from the top is the wheel stops, and just moving from left to right, new planters, traffic paint, spray paint, existing flat state, existing planters, all coming together and pulling it for along Peachtree Street. Next slide. Just a little bit of a detail on this. So the typical condition, we were looking at bulb outs at the intersections, really to kind of help set up the shared space where we'll have, in general, one vehicle lane in each direction. The red is proposed planters, both on-site and existing, and then you have the yellow, which is the existing planters that will be there along with flex posts. Next slide. The city has done a truly remarkable job in kind of getting a lot of these tactical urbanism elements out there. Maybe some of you have seen this, but this is a kind of what we are thinking about, very different context, but something similar, where you have the wheel stops, the striping, and the planters and the flex posts all working together to really provide that buffer and expanded pedestrian realm along the corridor. Next slide. Again, we are utilizing what the city has, not only what they have to date, but also pulling what we can from the guidebook and using that for other projects along this corridor. I think it's a great example of how they have set this up, and this Peachtree Street is a great test of this tactical urbanism on a big scale on your main street. Next slide. And just some examples of where this is done before. This is in Seattle, and you can see the wheel stops to your left and the planters along there to expand the bike facility. Next slide. This again is down in Miami. Tony had shown this earlier, and this was just a simple mural on either side of the street, reclaiming that space for pedestrians and activities. This is most similar to what we're thinking along Peachtree Street in the long-term phase 2. Next slide. This is again a reallocation of space and implementing a two-way bike facility along here with on-street parking. I believe this is down in Miami as well. Next slide. And something really simple of just using a beige paint along the sidewalk edge to carve out space for really any user. In this case, it's a real flex space similar to Peachtree Street. So those can be folks walking their dog, they can be folks in wheelchairs, they could be folks riding a bike, any kind of use outside of the vehicle use, that is kind of that flex space is for. Next slide. So what comes next? Next slide, please. So later this week, we will have a survey, and hopefully all of you have signed up for the mailing list, and you'll be getting a notification of when that comes out. We'll be having a survey and collecting some data on that. We're going to be looking at not only from you guys, but also collecting of what are the pedestrian counts today, given that it's COVID, but wanting to look at kind of the before and afters of the corridor and what we can really kind of test and see how it's working and what's not working. Next slide. We will continue to meet with people. There we go. We will continue to meet with people. I know last week, Tony and Monique went out for 2 days and met with, I think, almost every fronting business along Peachtree Street to discuss the project, drop off a flyer, answer any questions. This is what's happening right in the demonstration area. So this is something that Probably will need a couple additional meetings or two as it kind of builds up to the day and people get more excited and have more questions too. And we're really, that's what this is really testing. So the questions will be there and we'll be out there to help. Next slide. And then of course we're going to document this project, and it's, you know, everything from photography to those counts that I talked to you guys about in a couple slides previously, but also listening from the users, what's going well, what's not going well. As Kevin mentioned, it's going to be implemented, but give it a couple weeks to let it kind of shake out and let us know what's working, what's not working. This, you know, it's interesting. This is what this area is being used for. This is what was happening here. It's really an opportunity to test the things that we can test for shared space over the course of 90 days. Next slide. Next slide. So as you might have gathered, while it has been a while since we're here back in January, we have had a couple meetings with the public space working group, but there's been a lot of work in the back of house to get it ready for the week of June 21st, and that is including an intense schedule over here. You see on the left that kind of outlines day by day, almost hour by hour, who's doing what, when, and where along the corridor. It's quickly happening, and you can just see how detailed this activity will be as we go through this. Next slide. And these are just some slides, and Megan, you can just kind of scroll through here of just how it all comes together from, in this case, volunteers and laying out the materials and pulling together the materials, getting folks to measure, chalk out lines. Tony is great at guiding communities and cities through this process with great results. So we're super excited to be working with the group on kind of getting this up to speed. And then, you know, there's the considerations, and some of this is, you know, on the site, you know, what's going to happen and kind of, you know, responding to that as we move through it. Next slide. And these are just some more examples of this. Obviously, our partners at the DOT will be involved, CAP, ADID, MARTA hopefully will be able to engage as this well, along with Atlanta Regional Commission through this. We've had some great partners, we've had some great working relationships, and we're really excited that everybody's come together. This is one activity that we're still trying to flush out. If you could go back real quick, is stencils. While we're not ready to paint yet, we are looking at doing some stencils along the corridor to really just kind of highlight what the space could be used for: walking your dog, walking, riding, anything of that nature. Next slide. And then the fun part of painting when it gets down to that in phase 2. Hopefully when it's all said and done, we can celebrate. Right now, we are still under the city's COVID-19 restrictions, but that doesn't mean come June 26th, you can't start utilizing the space. And we really hope that you get out there and use the space, test it out, see what it can do. We're really excited about this opportunity to test the shared space. Next slide. Next slide. So save the date, June 21st through 25th is when our team will be in there, out there working. So you'll see us out there working. Hopefully it won't be raining, and hopefully it won't be too hot. But as I mentioned, launch day is June 26th. Again, event planning would be pending COVID conditions, but if you are interested in volunteering for this, please let us know, and you can let us know by our email address, peachtree@atlantanga.gov. And if we can allow some folks to come on and help with the build day, we would really love that to happen. Next slide. And just some key takeaways, and this is great because Tony's picture is in the background there. We're starting simple, starting with the curb stop and planners for phase 1 and traffic tape. Flexible, able to respond, so kind of those reactions and what's happening on the ground as we move through. But we will begin thinking about this phase 2 immediately, the painting. What happens with that mid-block crossing? Can we make that super exciting? What happens with the activation? And then, as this moves forward towards implementation, it would be great to kind of let the word out that this is coming on and get folks excited about, a fresh restart to Peachtree Street and downtown. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Kevin, kind of set up the Q&A, and Megan's gonna, I see off to the side the comments popping up, and ready to kind of spend the rest of the time talking about Q&A. So Kevin, was there anything else we wanted to add before we jumped into Q&A?
Yeah, I would just add that, I did see watching kind of all the questions as they come up, but the volunteering, kind of ending on that note, is we want people to take ownership of this. We want businesses to activate this, and especially in the creation of this, we would love to have as many people out there as possible. But we're keeping our eye on the phases of the city's reopening and kind of what we're allowed to do with large gatherings. And it seems we're rapidly, tracking in the right direction. But it's something that we'll be monitoring right up until the week before and letting people know. So if you are interested in potentially volunteering, should we have opportunities available, please do email peachtree@atlantagA.gov, and we'll put that in the chat, and let us know, and we'll collect those. And as we get closer, we will let everybody know kind of what the opportunities that may be, and hopefully there are plenty of those. And then the other part too is that all of this is part of the engagement. Again, is as much as we're hoping to connect with everybody and hear from them and make sure we've anticipated every little detail in the shared space. That we'll find out a lot once this goes in the ground, which is the point, right? So we do intend to continue traveling the 3 blocks, meeting back with everybody to kind of hear how it's not going, even if we're not there in time. We do have a single point of contact, and we will be working closely with our partners, DOT and Central Atlanta Progress, to make sure that we are responding to those quickly, and anticipate that we'll also have our team out there on a regular basis, just as a pop-up, and being able to engage with us. So we really do want to hear from folks of how it's not working, how we can make it better immediately, how we should be thinking about it differently. So we're excited. It's not every day you get to test something like this. We've done it in smaller neighborhoods with other these kind of tactical projects with some of the same materials, but this is the main street. So I guess with that, we can go to question and answer. Megan, are you going to start us off?
Yes. So everyone, I'll be looking at the chat box to pull questions and share those with our panel. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask, please feel free to type those in. We'll get through as many as we can over the next 20 minutes. I will try to consolidate similar questions just to keep topics together. And one other housekeeping thing, if your Zoom account is not currently showing your real name, if you could just hover over your name in the participant panel, you click more and then rename, so that you can put your name on there, so we can make sure we're addressing everyone appropriately. All right, so I'll start with the first question. Addie, I'll throw this one to you. It's asking about the project extent. And so it's saying, if Peachtree Center is the heart, according to what we've heard, could we extend the project further to center it, maybe taking it down to Edgewood Avenue to include Woodruff Park as the green space and incorporate Broad Street and Peachtree Center Station?
Love that question. So the overall study area is from Woodruff Park all the way north to North Avenue, so from Marietta North. We wanted to make sure the demonstration project was in an area that was had a lot of pedestrian activity, had a lot of things going on, not that other parts of the corridor don't, but also there was some elements that we just wanted to test with MARTA and the transit facilities and all that. So, and we also wanted to make sure we had enough resources to do it right. We did discuss, there's been a lot of discussion about how far should we expand it along the corridor? Do we keep it smaller? Do we only test 1 block? Do we test 3? So we've kind of been through that entire kind of discussion point, and where we landed was those 3 blocks for the demonstration project. Long term, the shared space, the full build out, I think looking at it, right where we're testing from Baker down to Ellis is definitely a no-brainer, but also looking at it, exploring it all down to Edgewood. I think the Woodruff Park section is an optimal section as well, with the vibrancy of that park and really kind of going back to what a true shared space is, which is parks and streets and people all in one area. So I think there's the long-term potential to expand the shared space along the corridor, but for now, for this initial demonstration project, it's just going to be focused on 3 blocks.
Great, thanks, Addie. Okay, the next question is asking, what kind of success or feedback from this pilot project would you need to see to feel comfortable spreading this effort out onto other streets? And that maybe it doesn't make sense to wait for the project to be complete before doing it elsewhere in the city. Understanding that this meeting is primarily about this project, I'll save that for a part 2, actually, of that question. I'll let you address this question first. Maybe Kevin, and then I think Vanessa is also on the line. I'll unmute you if you'd like to speak to that. Some other efforts.
I guess to start with, what kind of success do we need to see on other streets? I think, citywide, we're already doing this in other neighborhoods, and hopefully, I guess the question maybe came in early. You saw some of those examples. Nothing quite like we've tested a shared space in other neighborhoods before, but could we carve lane space out of a street to give back to dedicated bike facilities or sidewalk extensions? Certainly, pieces of this we're doing, and we've been doing that with what we call our placemaking program, and we've continued doing that work throughout the pandemic. I think for other downtown streets, we hope that this influences the way that we think about and make decisions about other streets in downtown by starting with a very focused thing in 3 blocks and going from there. What was the next part of the question?
If it needed to wait until getting the full results from this, and what you would need to see to judge success, or what kind of feedback you'd need to move forward with this.
That's a good question. I think we want to hear, we want to see how it's working. I don't think we have to wait 6 years until a shared space is installed before we would be willing to test this in other places. I'm making up the number 6. I have no idea where that came from, but we don't have to wait until like the final thing is in place before we could entertain the other areas. I think we're interested to see if we can make it successful here, whether it's in the 90 days or in an interim period, before we start taking other bites off of this. And we want to see how people are using the space. We want to see, what does this do to delay? Are more pedestrians coming out, or more people, as we start to bring on things like sidewalk dining? Are we able to pull those off? And once we kind of feel like we've figured this out for Peachtree, then we could have conversations about other spaces.
Sure. We also have Vanessa Lira on the line, who's been leading a lot of the tactical urbanism work throughout the city. Vanessa, is there anything you'd like to add?
Hey everybody, yes, I just posted here in the chat a link to our placemaking program. So like Megan said, and Kevin also mentioned, we've been doing these types of tactical projects all over the city. So we're certainly not waiting for Peachtree to do that type of work. And you can find out more about our projects. We've done a lot of temporary parklets that we're going to be enhancing soon. This year, we've done other sidewalk extensions and similar projects that are completed and also on the way. So you can find out more about those at atlcitydesign.com/placemaking.
Perfect. Thanks, Vanessa. Okay, the next question is thinking about future transit along Peachtree Street. So recognizing that this is mostly about the pilot, but asking if any consideration has been made to future-proof the shared space to accommodate transit, specifically installing underlying infrastructure for a streetcar extension, as described in the light rail plan. So Addie, would you like to take this one?
Can certainly take that one, and Kevin or Jason Morgan with the DOT, please correct me. But nothing that we are proposing here precludes having streetcar continuing up as out there. But I will say that streetcar plan does not have any funding allocated to date for that.
Okay, Jason, was there anything you'd like to add?
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, just want to make sure. Yeah, essentially, that's exactly where we are at this point as far as the potential extension. So there is a possibility at some point in the future that might be considered, but this, as Addie was mentioning, this project certainly does not preclude the potential for that, should that move forward at some point.
Great, thanks, Jason. Okay, the next question is a series of safety concerns. So I'll run through these. Then Addie and Kevin, you may both want to speak to this one. There's a concern about potential life safety challenges and a perception that two-lane streets wouldn't be able to handle a 5-alarm fire or something like a MARTA shutdown that would require bus bridging to accommodate rail users. And along with that concern that testing this during a time when we're not at peak occupancy for the buildings downtown might not paint the full picture. So Addie, would you like to address that one?
Sure, I'll take on the fire question first and then follow it up by the test, the
Occupancy.
the data, yeah,
Yeah.
occupancy and other. So we actually gosh, Monique and I met with the fire captain on, was it Tuesday or Wednesday of last week? And we walked the corridor with him, and he pointed out where the main hoses were and his concerns about the project, and we walked him through it. They were in support of the effort, and we walked him through the plans and what we were planning for that, and he was in full support along with his 2 staff members for that. So nothing that we're doing today would preclude the life safety, and that is very important, especially with these tall towers we have along Peachtree Street. Secondly, a lot of the numbers and the pedestrian data we collected was prior to COVID. So we have taken the data prior to COVID for all of our analysis, whether that's traffic, pedestrian volumes, bike volumes, all that. So that has happened before COVID hit. In fact, I think we got data, I think Central Atlanta Progress shared with us data from, I think the last count was like January, February of 2020, which is like, how did you get this data right in time? So that was perfect. And then we've taken that data and used it to look at the future impacts of this space. So all the data is based on pre-COVID.
Great, thank you. Kevin, is there any, or Monique, is there anything you wanted to add?
I think with just regards to fire, life safety is obviously a number one concern, which is why we took the time with fire to walk the site. And, we talked about everything from not just access to fire hydrants and standpipes, but also making sure that their ladder requirements and reaching towers were met relative to positioning within the streets. Even though we're effectively proposing to reduce this down to 2 travel lanes, 1 in each direction, that even the sidewalk expansion areas in an emergency, a fire truck could still enter either one of those if absolutely necessary. And hopefully that we never need to test that. You never want to have to test that. But we also have lots of other city streets downtown that are 2 lanes. So we feel good about what we're testing. It's only 3 blocks, and the math seems to work out, and thankfully our friends in the fire department agree with that. For the occupancy, thankfully we have good data from before, and maybe this is jumping ahead to other questions too. There's been a lot of talk about why now, wait until conditions to return to normal, and the relevancy of the data. And it's tough. Who's to say we will ever return back to traffic patterns exactly as they were pre-COVID? We've been in this situation for a very, very long time. We pushed this absolutely as far as we could with what we have available now to do this as close to kind of quote unquote, whatever new normal conditions may be. But we'll be looking at that too, have travel patterns, kind of background travel patterns changed and see how that works. But the way that we're starting to observe the data right now is that we're kind of not back to the way things were, but starting to see activity and traffic along Peachtree, particularly midday, as it might have been in some times of the day in the past. So again, it's not perfect, but we're about as close as I think we can get, at least to start. And that's why we're going to extend this. That's why we went from something that was 2 days to something like, can we really test this and see as traffic starts to come back and see what the data tells us.
Great. We have a few different questions that I'm going to tie together that have been referencing specific modes of travel and wondering how those would be accommodated in both the demonstration project and the shared space. So some of the specific ones that have been mentioned are, will there be dedicated bike lanes? How would the horse carriages operate? And then how would deliveries work, especially for things like armored vehicles going to the banks along Peachtree Street? So Addie, would you like to speak to how some of those those different modes will be accommodated?
Sure, absolutely. So in terms of the bike lanes, that was one of the areas that we threw out there for, how do we kind of test it, with bike lanes, and one of those kind of cross sections we threw out there at the beginning of the demonstration project. But we really wanted to test what a shared space was, and a shared space will not have dedicated bike facilities. Now, in phase 1 of this demonstration project, where there's no activity or no tables in that expanded area, bikes can certainly use that area. But for a true shared space, bikes would go along within the vehicle travel lane through there. One of the things that we found through the data was that the current speeds along Peachtree Street pre-COVID-19 were about 16 miles per hour. After looking at it, one traveling in each direction, it would drop down to about 13 miles an hour. So slow travel speeds along there, which would help accommodate bicyclists using the vehicular lane. What was the next question, Megan? Sorry.
The other modes that were specifically asked about were for deliveries, especially like armored vehicles going to the banks, and then also horse carriages.
I'm going to see if Monique might want to kind of address some of the banks. So we did speak to all, Monique and Tony went to each bank to talk with them about how that in general operates, just because I say in general is, they don't give you a time for when they're going to come and pick up the funding. But we did watch a lot of the armored trucks pop up and, pick up money or deliver. So Monique, I know there's at least 5 banks along the corridor that we spoke to about that effort.
Well, the banks that we spoke to, they are sitting on the corners. And so they said that sometimes the armored trucks come on Peachtree and sometimes they use side street. And they don't know which one. So they seem very open to our project and what it's going to do. And we did actually see one armored truck in particular in the lane, in not the outer lane, but in the inner lane, due to some other deliveries being on that, being in the outer lane. So pretty much our observation from just being out there is that the corridor, and especially in the space that we're talking about, in the 3 blocks that we're talking about, the outer lanes are used a lot for deliveries, whether they're micro deliveries, so meaning whether they're Uber Eats, or bigger deliveries like UPS. The UPS is your Amazons, or valet. So that travel lane is really not a true travel lane in most instances. They're all used for some type of delivery or some type of curb space dealing. So what we are trying to do is to basically, the corridor is already almost operating as if there is one travel lane each way because of all of the deliveries and all of the movement on the outer lane. So we're just trying to basically formalize it in a sense. So yeah, we talked to some banks we have to follow up with because they were too busy, which is good because that means people are coming back for us to talk to them in full, but we did leave some materials for them.
Great. Thanks, Monique.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll start by saying we have a number of additional questions in the chat and only 3 minutes left. So I don't think we'll be able to address all of these, but you can look back to our website in the next couple of days. We can post some additional responses there. I'll finish us off with a question that sort of leads us into the next phase and is on a topic we haven't touched on yet, which is asking about businesses and having mentioned that there wouldn't be curbside dining in phase 1, but asking, aren't businesses interested in testing that? So Monique, would you maybe want to talk to what you've been coordinating with some of the businesses on?
So yeah, actually, we from phase 1 to phase 2, we see as it'll be more of a soft transitioning. So there probably will be some outdoor dining in phase 1. We are coordinating with some of the restaurants, and well, we're coordinating with hotels too, but we're also coordinating with restaurants as far as the outdoor dining, and also trying to get a way to secure, the furniture that's needed for that as well. So it's very exciting. They seem to be very excited about having this additional space, especially in this time where the CDC recommends for us to still eat outside. If we're going to eat, we're going to eat outside, and that it will be safer. So they're very excited about that. And we are too.
Great, thank you. Addie, do you want to wrap us up, or I guess we have 2 minutes if you want to do one more question? One more? Okay. So there's a few questions around a similar theme of safety for both cyclists and scooters, and safety from scooters has been a theme. Trying to understand, if this will be having like a skate park feel, people have been saying, and what will be done to help minimize that. And then for cyclists, concerns about conflicts with additional vehicles if there's not as much curbside space available. So how those 2 modes will be accommodated for safety purposes.
Kevin, do you want to take the scooter kind of question, then I can kind of jump on the bikes?
Sorry, getting myself off mute there. Yeah, the scooters have obviously been a challenge for us all in any kind of condition of configuration of a street. So the idea is that we want to see how the behavior in this space is, and try to account for that. Part of the beginning of the demonstration project will be that for a week or 2 weeks, we want to kind of see just what the traffic patterns are like, not just for cars, but for pedestrians, bikes, scooters. Are there any modifications we need to do to kind of make it work better for that? We've also talked a lot about where do we kind of corral the scooters as best we can, and designate where they go. And then, as we were just talking about too, the on-street dining locations, the response was great about those as we start to bring up other activities that can happen in these sidewalk expansion areas. Have that kind of start to dictate where movement through the space starts to go as well.
Great. And then Addie, would you like to speak to how bikes will be accommodated? We've gotten a number of requests for dedicated bike lanes, and just better understanding how they'll safely move with vehicles.
Well, the good thing about the bike lanes today is that there's bike lanes on a parallel street. I think we definitely want bikes to use Peachtree Street, and they can use in that expanded pedestrian area in the midterm. But eventually we want the speeds along Peachtree Street, we do want them to be moving through on the vehicular lanes as that expanded pedestrian area has more outdoor dining and becomes a lot more vibrant, and getting the scooters off the sidewalk as well into the street as well.
Great, thank you. One other note in the chat, that the deliveries will be directed as much as possible to use side streets, which will help to minimize the number of conflicts there. Okay, so I'll just quickly answer one final question we've gotten: if this presentation will be available online, and the answer is yes. So the project website that you visited to register for this event, sharepeachtree.com. If you look on the Engage page there, that's where we've been posting all of the project recordings. So you'll be able to access this within the next day or two. But Addie, would you like to wrap us up?
I'll actually see if Kevin wants to wrap us up, but thank you so much for being with us on this evening. We really appreciate your insight and feedback. I'm really excited about this project. We're really excited to get the real-time feedback as it comes on, and test what the future of Atlanta could be. Kevin?
Yeah, I think just 2 closing items. One is I don't know if we had any of our business owners or anybody that's living along the stretch. We've been trying our best and our hardest to kind of reach out and connect with anybody. But if there's anybody on the line tonight, or know of somebody that feels like they haven't been heard or heard appropriately, please do reach out to us with our contact information here, and we're going to continue having those conversations all the way up to the installation and then beyond. So we're continuing that work, and just to kind of hit home the point that this is a demonstration project. When this opens up on June 26th, there will be pieces still to kind of work out and get right, but as we've seen demonstration projects done in other cities, you've got to give it the time and the patience to allow us to kind of collect the data, make the observations, talk, and really kind of get used to it, and then objectively make a decision of is this something we continue with, or is this something that genuinely was not the right solution for the space, and not necessarily just be reactionary about it. So I think I challenge all of us. We hope it works great on day one, but we're ready to adjust and hopefully make it as successful as we can, and invite you all to be a part of it. And thank you for coming this evening.
Great, thank you all so much. And we appreciate you being here. We'll look forward to additional comments at the email that you see on the screen. I'll just leave it up for a couple seconds in case folks are writing that down. But we look forward to continuing to speak with you. All right, 10-second warning if you have your pen out. Okay, thank you all so much. Have a good evening.